too often we hear, oh, there was some threat, somebody had contacted them and it had been ignored. And one of the biggest things about the West is the fear of racism. The authorities are so frightened to death of this, is that everybody from the lowest constable to the commissioner of the police, the worst thing you can say about them is they're racist, and it stops people's careers, it gets them sacked, and we need to stop being so naive and stupid.
Let's speak now to GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who joins us. But just to update you, a British-born rabbi was among one of the 12 who was killed on this awful tragedy. What do you think as you see this, and mainly in terms of the way anti-Semitism sort of permeated every nook and cranny, every country we're seeing anti-Semitism in its worst form?
Well, when you say every country, it's really places with Western governments, particularly those with the sort of left-leaning side. And I was listening to a Jewish commentator on this event, and just like this country, you've got areas in Sydney where the left-wing vote is really reliant on heavily Muslim voters. So it really mirrors the United Kingdom. And the problem is then that some of the Jewish community, what they're saying is that the head of the Australian Jewish Association is saying that the Prime Minister's let them down. You know, they've been warning consistently about anti-Semitic incidents. There was a synagogue firebomb. There's been all sorts of attempted arsons across the country, you know, Sydney and in Melbourne. And the Jewish community just feel let down. Of course, we see the same in this country. When I speak to my Jewish friends, my heart goes out that they feel afraid to, say, go to central London, and it will be the same. Bondi Beach is a tourist area. It should be a happy place for everybody, shouldn't it, to enjoy? You know, we're in the middle of freezing cold winter here. It's summer in Australia. This is a place where people should be happy, should be able to enjoy themselves with their families. And here we have another wicked and evil terrorist attack on Jewish people.
Do you think it's really unfair that Jewish people have been, for so many years, been forced to, in a sense, police themselves because they have been, as you said, warning that there'll be an attack of this nature, pleading with the authorities to do something about it? But there's no other community that I know of that has to behave in the manner that the Jewish people have to keep themselves safe.
You're absolutely right. I was asked to go by a friend to his synagogue and speak about forensic science, and I was met with a sort of big fence and a security guard in London. You think, and this is about 5-6 years ago, you think, what sort of place do we live in where, you know, a place of worship, a synagogue, has got to be behind this fence with security staff? And from a sort of family point of view, my grandfather was at the liberation of Belsen. I just can't imagine what he would think to see this. And it is throughout the West, though, we got this lunacy of recognising a non-existent state, Palestine, by both the government here and the Prime Minister Albanese in Australia has done the same. And it's just, all that does is, in my view, is stab the Jewish community in the back. It just achieves nothing else. It just leaves them even more vulnerable. And it just makes some of the extreme Palestinian supporters feel even more confident in their wickedness.
Well, Mike, I'm going to bring in one of my panellists, Danny Kelly, who wants to pose a question to you.
Hiya, Mike. Danny Kelly here. You mentioned something earlier about it probably being easier to get a shotgun, not legally, but illegitimately. There was a case about 2 years ago, and it featured on a Channel 4 documentary, 24 Hours in Police Custody, about a young 19-year-old lad who killed his mother and who killed his sister. And then he was prevented from going on a school rampage. He had a fascination with American-style mass shootings, Mike. And he actually got the shotgun. I don't know whether you're aware of this. This fella's called Nicholas Prosper. He actually deceived a private gun seller online. This is so simple, using a forged shotgun licence to acquire the weapon. Now, we're sitting in the studio in London today. I've got friends of mine who are at Birmingham Christmas markets, surrounded by armed police from West Midlands Police, having to walk through these massive metal structures to prevent cars going on a vehicular rampage. Would you like to comment about how easy it is, Mike, to actually forge documentation and acquire guns, and I'm going to put this in inverted commas, legally?
Well, anything online is going to be very suspect. We saw Axel Rudiger-Barner buying knives online, lying and using false documents. I mean, knives are very difficult to control because everybody's got them in the kitchen. Guns are easier. But the trouble, as I said, with shotguns is that farmers have a very legitimate use for them. I can't think of any real legitimate use for a private citizen having an AK-47 or a sniper rifle like we saw here. But the shotguns are going to be very, very difficult. But I think there really is a case for banning guns to be sold online. There's no reason for it. I think you should have to turn up and show your face so you can be caught on CCTV. The person knows you're dealing with the actual person whose documentation is being shown. But it is far too easy to trick people and deceive them online and then obtain things which are dangerous to everybody else.
I find it shocking that you can actually buy a gun online. I think that should be banned. What do you think, Mike, should be the next move for the Australian government? And I suspect what they do to protect Jewish people will probably be mirrored here, because it can't go on, Jewish people having to protect themselves and having to pay for their own security, having to accompany their kids to school in a manner that is not like any other place. I can't think of any other place, and as you say, in Western countries in particular, where that is a factor. What can the government or what can the police, what needs to happen now?
Well, they need to be honest about it. We see in this country, don't we, that too much of the prevent time is taken up on a sort of far-right threat, which is often non-existent, whereas the threat from Islamic terrorists is really real. And we all know it is not all Muslims involved. The guy who stopped the shooting today, Mr. Ahmed, is a Muslim. We know that's a fact. But we've got to be honest about this. And the first thing the authorities need to do is get every available police officer out there patrolling, making sure communities feel safe. In the longer term, though, they need to look at everybody who is a threat and make sure there's something dealt with them. But every day in this country, and Australia is better than us, undocumented young men arrive who look very much like the two men involved in this shooting, and they're allowed to wander free. And this is absolute madness. If you come to this country like that, or you go to Australia, and they say you should be put in a camp, and your documentation, your identity, your motives should be checked until you're anywhere allowed to wander. Because let's find out where these two are from. And the authorities, of course, have got to look into what they knew about them already, because too often we hear, oh, there was some threat, somebody had contacted them and it had been ignored. And one of the biggest things about the West is the fear of racism. The authorities are so frightened to death of this, is that everybody from the lowest constable to the commissioner of the police, the worst thing you can say about them is they're racist, and it stops people's careers, it gets them sacked, and we need to stop being so naive and stupid.
Oh, well, obviously there's no evidence that these guys were migrants or illegal migrants, as it were. And to be fair to Australia, their immigration policy is quite strict. They're pretty good at that one. So, but I want to bring in Andy Williams to the conversation. He has a question for you.
Yeah, Mike, our previous guest, Gary Mond, said that he would like to see the government introduce a ban on the pro-Palestine protests that we've seen in London for going on for years now. What do you make of that suggestion, and how should the police be thinking about balancing, some of the really, really distasteful scenes that have occurred at those protests with the right to protest, which is a really fundamentally important aspect?
Well, I think, yes, it's a very difficult balance. But if they want to do these marches, let's say you can do it in Hyde Park. So you're going to do it, you march around, you can walk around Hyde Park. Everything will be videoed. Everything will be recorded. There'll be a large police presence. These are the phrases and words which are completely unacceptable. Anybody uttering them, seen uttering them, heard uttering them, will be arrested. And let's be ruthless. The police showed they could be ruthless. When it came to the Palestine action, the arrest there, where they arrested 500 people all over Trafalgar Square and the like, the police have shown that they can do this. And they need to be more robust. But as I say, firstly, you set the ground. You're not marching all the way through central London. You can have your freedom of speech, but that's going to be in Hyde Park or some other venue. Secondly, we're going to video and record everybody who's on that march, and if they say any of these wicked things, which in essence mean we're going to kill Jews or destroy Israel, then you will be arrested and ruthlessly dealt with. What about balaclavas? Will you ban those as well? Because some of them are covering their face, and you're going to have facial recognition cameras, presumably. Well, absolutely, because it only takes an inspector, though. An inspector can give the authority that the law will be imposed that you cannot have face covering. So, that, in a sense, the legislation exists for that already. And if you refuse to remove that face covering, then you're under arrest. So, yes, that would be easily dealt with. But what if you came in a burqa? Well, if you came in a burqa, I would I would insist, if you're going to walk around that burqa, you will take it off and you have your face. You have your face photographed, and you don't take part in the march. We've said there's no face coverings. There is no face coverings. That's a face covering. Go home.
No, I think that's a really interesting suggestion, Mike, about sort of identifying a specific area where people have to protest. Because I must admit, I am a bit uncomfortable. I hear what Gary was saying. I'm a bit uncomfortable with the idea that you should ban those protests completely. I think that maybe is a step too far. I'm not sure it gets the balance right. But saying you have to protest in a confined space at this time on this day, and absolutely, if you want to go out there and express your view, you should be prepared for your, to be videoed and for your photo to be taken. So I think that's a good balance, actually.
I think also that if you do say things like that, rather than you can put them in custody, but I think, Mike, do you not think that perhaps there could be a fine as well? Because I think once it hits someone's pocket and they have to pay for, so they have to pay for, I don't know, a charge of maybe 500 quid or something. That money will go towards some charity that helps. Do you know what I mean, Mike? Do you think that
the only problem with that, I think, is these organisations are probably funded from abroad. I have no doubts that people who kind of destabilise the West would fund them. And so no one's really worried about money in the sense that somebody else would pay it. But when you go to jail, you do the jail time yourself, and there's no way out of that. So that's why I think jail is much more appropriate than fines.
You can have both. You could do both.
But I really do think that there is some sort of coordination of these matters from abroad, and finance will be available. So you can fine them £1 million, and somebody will find £1 million for them to pay off.
Well, maybe, but there'll be some people who just hang on and get involved in it because, a lot of those on the far left who haven't really got a clue what they're protesting for, who've just come along for a jolly. It became a sort of weekly event for some people who get the coach, the boogie bus, I don't know what they called it, that would bring them from wherever it was to come and congeal in London and cause chaos.
Be in no doubt that there are bandwagon jumpers everywhere on these protests.
But they would be afraid of the fine. I think they should be fined, the prison thing as well, the record, all of those things, I think, together would stop a lot of people. Do you not think...
It would stop a lot of. I think it would stop a lot of the hangers-on. Like I said, when I was a young policeman, you go into London, and whether it would stop the bomb, save the whale, or whatever, ban the war, it would be the same individuals in their, ponytails and sandals and socks, really. So I think you would get rid of some of those possibly with a £500 fine. But there are some very hardline people, and as I say, they're probably financed from abroad. They've got no need to worry about money. What we need to do is put them in jail. And then we need to look at where they're from, and if we can deport them, we need to ship them out. It's gone too far, and I think everybody is now noticing that. I always say this, that Douglas Murray refers to it as the crime of noticing, and people are noticing that our communities are changing. There are real fractures in society where people are completely separate. The only thing the Prime Minister's ever said that I agreed with is that we are an island of strangers. And he retracted that, but we are an island of strangers, and we can't have it where, votes are being cast in Oldham about things going on in Gaza.
Mike, it's Danny again, Mike. I don't know when you left the force, Scotland Yard, as a detective, but whether it was in the last 5-10 years, if you're still in touch with your pals at the Met, have they told you about, the watch list? Because we understand that there's a terror watch list, and I know MI5 is different to Scotland Yard, but you all talk to each other. Has that number plateaued, or is it increasing with... We're hearing about so many people coming into this country illegally. Is that having a proportionate effect on the watch list that you know of?
Of course. The number of terrorist suspects goes up and up and up. And it seemed almost impossible to keep a track on tens of thousands of people who pose a really serious risk to this country. And yet we have a situation where it's been allowed to go on and on. And let's say, whether it's Sydney, Australia, or London in England, the authorities have allowed this to happen. Their biggest fear is not these terrorist attacks. It's been accused of racism. And what this results in is that people don't act. And at the most basic level, if you looked at, I heard today that it took some time for the police to react, to start shooting back. It's tragic that an officer's lost their lives. But I go back to the Manchester Arena bombing, where the young security guard, he saw a baby with a massive rucksack, Asian man with a massive rucksack on his back, outside a concert which would generally be attended by young teenage girls. He was out of place. But the young security guard felt afraid to do anything because he might be accused of the most wicked crime on the earth, racism. And as a result of that, we have more than 20 people dead. And how often do the police react slowly? Because you cannot blame officers who have to react quickly, but then they're in the back of their head. They've had a colleague tried for murder, for just doing his job. And this really, the police response is being handicapped because of Western establishment guilt.
Yeah, it is really quite shocking that kind of behaviour still goes on. But the bottom line is this person, these people who perpetrated this heinous act may well be Australian citizens, may not have come there illegally. Most people can't really get into Australia illegally. They're probably citizens of Australia. We'll wait and we'll get all the details. It will be interesting to see. Do you think, Mike, in this country, though, that multiculturalism has failed?
Utterly failed, because some people never integrate. In northern towns, there are two parts. A lot of Jewish people integrate, Hindu people integrate, Caribbean people integrate. The biggest problem is large areas of Muslim immigrants, particularly from the poorer areas of places like Pakistan and Bangladesh, where there is no integration at all. It simply is an island of strangers, and that is no good for any community whatsoever. As I say, many aspects have worked. People come here, like I say, from the Caribbean, where it's a very British-style culture, and in fact more aggravated, more exaggerated than British people sometimes. Likewise with Hindu people. But the real issue is in Muslim communities where then Islamists can hide away, and they've got a place to bolt back to. That's where the problem lies, and we've got to be honest about this, else we'll never solve the problem.
And just to remind you, we're not talking about the everyday, normal, good Muslim people, of which there are many, and they are the majority. In this case, we're talking about
my brother-in-law's a doctor. Yeah. My brother-in-law's a Muslim doctor in Germany, so I'm fully aware, and we only have to look at the man who stopped the shooting. But the facts are, these threats come from the Muslim community, and we've got to be honest about this. That's where the integration issue lies, and we can't keep pretending it doesn't.
All right, well, listen, Mike, it's been really good to talk to you. That is Mike Neville. He's a former Scotland Yard detective. If you've just joined us, welcome. This is GB News, just coming up to 4:30. I'm Nana Akua. We are, of course, discussing the awful incident that happened on Bondi Beach, where 12 people were killed, one of which, as we now know, is a British-born Jewish rabbi. Well, GB News presenter Josh Howie joins me in the studio. Josh, really, really tragic news.
Yeah, another day waking up